A group of 5 was fishing on the Zambezi River between Zimbabwe and Zambia when a hippo attacked their boat and sent them plunging into the water. They managed to swim to a sandbar in the middle of the river, but were now stranded with crocodile-infested water on either side. As night settled in, the river began to rise and the group would have to fight for their lives. Viewer discretion is advised. On a beautiful Easter Sunday morning, canoe guide Phil Longden led a group of German tourists into a small channel off of the Zambezi River. The Zambezi River is the 4th longest river in Africa, and the area they were in is a section that separates Zambia to the north and Zimbabwe to the south. The river in that area is home to many of the megafauna that are classically associated with the African continent, such as elephants, hippos, and lions. On their trip, they had nearly filled their cameras from all the pictures they had taken, and that day they intended on doing more of the same. On the banks of the river, water bucks and impalas grazed the grass, hippos swam nearby, making large ripples under the water and giving the occasional grunt. On the sandbanks of the river, crocodiles lay motionless, appearing to be relaxed, but in reality, watching for prey. Built like an Olympic rower, Phil Longden was very experienced on the Zambezi. He expertly guided their group in the fiberglass canoes across the scenic floodplain that sat at the foot of the Zambezi escarpment. At some point that morning, Phil called everyone together to spend some time relaxing in something known as a legover. This is where the canoes are set up side by side and each canoeist puts their legs over the side into the parallel canoes to hold them in place. After organizing the canoes, they rested their paddles, laid back, and enjoyed the rest as the canoes drifted down the river. Out of nowhere, a hippo leapt out of the grass and into the water right beside them. Phil screamed for everyone to get back in the canoe and kicked the adjoining canoes apart. As he pulled his foot away, the hippo surfaced and clamped its massive jaws on his leg, plunging its incisors into his flesh. The 4-ton hippo then shook Phil like a ragdoll and shredded the flesh and bone on his leg. Phil tried to hit the hippo with his paddle, but the hippo pulled him out of the canoe and into the water. The group smacked at the water with their paddles to try to scare away the hippo, but Phil was nowhere to be seen. Miraculously, a few moments later, Phil resurfaced and the others pulled him into the canoe and then paddled frantically to the shore. As they paddled, Phil looked down at his mangled leg and knew that those few seconds had changed his life forever. His leg was just barely attached still and the burning pain above his knee was unbearable. In the quiet after the attack, he looked at the water and saw his bright blue paddle drifting down the river. He then looked up at the sky and felt the sadness overwhelm him. On that same Sunday, a group of 5 was traveling from their camp to roughly 100 miles downriver from where Phil was bitten. They intended on doing some fishing over the next couple of days and had no knowledge of the tragedy that had occurred just hours prior. Their group consisted of 2 professional hunters, Alistair Gallatley and Arthur Taylor, Arthur's wife Faye, and Faye's parents, Clive and Brenda Kelly, who were visiting from England. 2 days later, on Tuesday morning, the group was traveling on their powerboat near Mupata Gorge. It was a beautiful sunny day, no one was around, and the group was just drifting downriver fishing for tigerfish. They could see some elephants on the north bank, and to make things even better, the fish were biting. It was just an all-around great time. Out of nowhere, there was a huge bang on the front end of the boat, and the boat exploded out of the water and knocked everyone to one side. This caused the boat to be in a precarious position, listening to the side everyone was on. One more huge bang, and the boat tipped over completely and capsized. A hippo had attacked their boat as well, and this caused the entire group to fall into the Zambezi River. Another thing that this river is known for is the massive Nile crocodiles that infest its waters. Knowing this, the group knew they had to swim for their lives to get out of the water as quickly as possible. To make things worse, Faye's parents couldn't swim. Arthur and Faye managed to grab Brenda and started swimming to a nearby sandbar, while Alistair and Clive grabbed a rope attached to the now upside-down boat. They pulled themselves to the boat and got on top of it, but it was quickly sinking. As soon as Arthur and Faye got Brenda to the sandbar, Arthur dove back into the water and swam back to the boat. Once he was there, he and Alistair pulled Clive back to the sandbar as well as the boat slowly disappeared under the murky water. The group stood there exhausted, just taking in what had happened. It was now midday and there was plenty of daylight left, so they could wait for another boat to arrive, but there was also no guarantee that someone would come by. They could even wait a whole day under normal circumstances, but the Zambezi River water level is controlled by a dam 200 miles upstream. If the dam opened, the water level would rise, and the sandbar they were standing on would be submerged, giving the crocodiles in the river easy access to the defenseless group. Alistair decided he would try to swim to the riverbank and then run to a fishing camp that was about 5 kilometers away from where they were. This was potentially a suicide mission because it would be a 200-meter swim in the crocodile-infested water. They didn't really have another choice though, and so he dove into the water and swam as fast as he could. Although Alistair was an experienced hunter, he wasn't exactly a fitness fanatic. Regardless, he hit the water as hard as he could with each stroke and eventually made it to the other side of the river. Completely exhausted, he started up the bank, but it ended up being too steep for him to climb, and so he looked around and saw a small inlet. He swam towards it, and as he rounded the corner, he saw that the bank was a nice, gradual slope. In the inlet, the water was much calmer and the surface was almost mirror-like. It was also dead quiet, and a second later, he realized why. Straight ahead of him, just poking up out of the water, was the scaly, dead-eyed head of a Nile crocodile. Then, a small ripple formed as the crocodile began to move. Alistair waited motionless, hoping not to be seen, but it was clear that the crocodile was coming for him now. He knew it would grab him and tear him apart, and so he dove into the water to try to get around it. The crocodile slammed into him as it attacked, and Alistair kicked and punched under the water, trying to keep it away from him. At first, he managed to keep its gaping mouth from latching onto him. The crocodile circled and then disappeared, and then the water was quiet. Another burst of waves came, and the crocodile clamped down with its full weight onto his right arm at the elbow, pulling him under the water. The experienced hunter knew that the crocodile would start its horrible death roll any second. After clamping down on a limb, crocodiles will spin violently, attempting to literally shear the limb away from the body. He knew that any second, his arm would be pulled violently from its socket, and so he wrapped his legs around its body so that he would spin with it. This would at least prevent his arm from being torn off instantly. He then remembered being told to gouge the eye of an attacking crocodile to get it to let go, and with that, he jammed his thumb into its eye so hard that he thought that he had literally broken his thumb. The crocodile didn't even flinch, and Alistair was now seconds away from death. In a last-ditch effort, he reached into the crocodile's throat and clawed at anything he could. He would actually manage to grab a hold of the crocodile's epiglottis and pulled and yanked on it. The epiglottis is the flap of skin that separates the trachea from the esophagus, and so with it being pulled on, the crocodile's lungs began to fill with water. Miraculously, the crocodile let go and dove away into the deep water. Alistair then lunged for the bank of the river and crawled up onto the shore. He then looked at his mangled right arm. His elbow was dislocated, the bones were shattered, and blood was pouring out of the wounds. If he didn't stop the bleeding immediately, he would bleed to death, and he knew that the wounds were also filled with deadly parasites from the crocodile's mouth and teeth. Without medical treatment, the wounds would become infected, and he would definitely lose his arm, if not his life. He went back to the riverbank and tried to wash his arm as best he could. He then took off his shirt and tied it around his arm to cover the wounds and slow the bleeding. Too weak to walk now, he found a place to lie down and collapsed onto the ground. Back on the sandbar, the group was getting worried. It had been a long time since Alistair had left, and they feared that something had happened to him. Even worse, their worst fears were coming true. The water level of the river was rising. The water that was previously just up to their ankles was now up to their knees. As night fell, they would be in the dark and fully exposed in the river with nothing but their hands to fight off the Nile monsters. Incredibly, just before the sun crested the horizon, they spotted something blue drifting down the river. Phil Longden's paddle had traveled 100 miles downriver over 2 days and arrived at the group just in time for nightfall. They would now at least have a weapon to fight off the crocodiles over the night. Back on the shore, knowing the long night was coming, Alistair laid down on a bed of leaves to spend the night on. He also gathered some stones to fend off any potential predators, although he knew in his current state that they would offer little protection. At nighttime, all of the large predators like lions, leopards, and hyenas would leave their daytime dens and come out to find food. Alistair was terrified. Not only did they already have a keen sense of smell, but he had also left a large blood trail directly to where he was now resting. The wind coming off of the river and the approaching night made him shake. Then he heard twigs cracking in the nearby trees. The heaviness of the footsteps meant something big was approaching. Then, the massive horns of a Cape buffalo came into view, and he wondered if it had seen him or if it was just a coincidence that the buffalo had found him. Before he could react, the buffalo started charging directly at him. Alistair was too weak to run, and so he just accepted his fate and waited for the buffalo to reach him. Right before it was about to ram him, it stopped, just a few feet away. It raised its head high in the air and shook it, and then looked directly at him as if it knew that he was in trouble. The buffalo then turned and followed his blood trail to the riverbank, stood there for a moment, and then sauntered back and laid down nearby. Alistair couldn't believe it. It seemed as though the buffalo was trying to protect him. Of all people, this buffalo was protecting Alistair, a big game hunter. As night fell, the whooping of hyenas nearby sent shivers down Alistair's spine. The large Cape buffalo chewed cud just a few feet away from him, and he wondered if it would be enough to keep the predators at bay. Amazingly, although the hyenas sounded close throughout the night, they didn't attack him. Back on the sandbar, the others were living a literal nightmare. The water was even higher now, and the current was so strong it was difficult to stand. In the moonlight, they could see the light glinting off of the eyes of the crocodiles in the water as they slowly made their way closer to the sandbar. As they got closer, Arthur had to beat the water with the paddle to keep them at bay. This was obviously incredibly tiring. They had fallen off the boat at around midday, and they had been standing on the sandbar since then without rest. Every time he stopped to take a break, the crocodiles would charge in and get really close to where they were standing. On 2 occasions, they got close enough that he had to actually beat them over the head with the paddle while the group shouted and hit the water with their hands. And this all took place in pitch black darkness with just the light of the moon to help them see. Just a few hundred meters away, Alistair was curled in a ball, trying to survive the night as well. All the while, he was carefully tending to the tourniquet over the wounds on his arm. If he tightened it too much, his arm wouldn't have blood flow and the tissue would die. If it was too loose, he would bleed out, and so every 30 minutes or so he had to loosen it briefly to let blood flow into the area. Eventually though, sometime in the middle of the night, he lost consciousness. This was almost certain to be fatal, but then he woke up to thousands of red ants covering his body and biting him all over. They had been attracted to his blood and were swarming the wounds on his right arm. The stinging pain woke him up and he frantically started brushing them off of him. He would manage to get them all off of him, and this kept him awake for the rest of the night, allowing him to continue tending to his tourniquet. As horrible as it was, this incident likely saved his life. Eventually, he started to hear the sound of birds. Then he saw the faint light of the sun on the distant horizon. As dawn arrived, the massive Cape buffalo stood up, looked at Alistair briefly, and then sauntered away. Alistair thought to himself that even if he did survive, no one would believe that this had happened. With the sun now up, Alistair gathered up his remaining strength and started walking to find help. He would eventually see a man far off in the river and tried to shout, but he didn't have enough strength. He then tried to raise his arm to wave to the man, but the man didn't understand. Apparently, he thought that Alistair was a falconer and that his bandaged arm was actually the gloved arm that falconers typically have. Alistair collapsed on the ground once again, frustrated and exhausted. Thankfully, the others on the sandbar had more luck and they were spotted by a group of canoeists as they went down the river. 24 hours after the boat had capsized, the group was recovered from the water by the group of canoeists. On the shore, Alistair waited, lying down, waving his arm in hopes of someone finding him. He would eventually be spotted by some fishermen on the south side of the river. The fishermen picked him up and carried him to their boat and then took him to Bush Airfield in Zimbabwe. At the airfield, they radioed a plane about the situation, and Alistair was soon being transported to a hospital. He would later say that the sound of the airplane engine was the best sound he'd ever heard. It had been 24 hours since he had been attacked, and he was worried about gangrene setting into the wounds. 2 days prior, after Phil Longden had been attacked, he was transported to their base camp that evening. Thankfully, there were 2 doctors in attendance who were able to tend to his wounds, but unfortunately, despite their best efforts, they were not able to prevent gangrene from the hippo bite, and his leg had to be removed above the knee. His sacrifice was not in vain, however. In a serendipitous turn of events, the paddle that he had lost in the attack likely saved the lives of the group that had gotten stranded on the sandbar 2 days later. Alistair would go on to make a full recovery as well. His arm was even able to be saved, and apart from some scarring and some dexterity issues, he was able to start hunting again 9 months later. If you made it this far, I just wanted to thank you for watching. My name is Sean, and welcome to Scary Interesting. This is part 3 of my They Shouldn't Be Alive series, so if you enjoyed this video, you may want to check out the other 2 videos in the series. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of my weekly videos. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.